Hi, I'm Rick Bayless, and I've been exploring, cooking, and eating in Mexico for over 40 years. Now I'm taking you to Mexico City for a deep dive into the classic dishes you've asked to learn. It's time to share my best recipes ever. Since colonial times, La Merced has been the market area for Mexico City. Over the years, almost the entire neighborhood has become part of that market, selling every variety of almost anything that you can think of. Now, I think it is fitting that to start our deep dive into Chile Rellenos, that I've taken you near the grand ancient Merced Market to a place that for 4 generations has been a green chili warehouse. It's a restaurant today, still in that same family, but a restaurant that specializes in, as you guessed it, Chiles Rellenos. Now, the chef is a young guy. His name is Romulo Mendoza, and he's been to culinary school. And so he brings a certain sort of chef's mentality to a lot of the menu that's here. I mean, sometimes his chiles rellenos will be battered and fried in the traditional style. Sometimes they won't be. Sometimes they'll be filled with that classic chopped pork picadillo, other times with vegetables or cheese or shrimp or what have you. Now, what I have right in front of me is the most classic chile relleno, battered and fried, filled with a picadillo on the inside, the chopped meat filling that's so common here in central Mexico, and then covered with a brothy tomato sauce over the top, served with rice on the side. I can't wait to dig into this because this, to me, is where I learned chiles rellenos. This is classic and really delicious. Now, this version of chiles rellenos is similar to what I like to make at home all the time because I love vegetables, and this is so easy to do. You roast and peel the poblanos, and then you stuff them with a mixture of vegetables, whatever you have on hand. It looks like in here we've got zucchini and corn and maybe some more poblano chopped up for that. Cover it with a little bit of cheese. You can put it into the oven so that that cheese melts, and well, you've just got something that I think is both vegetarian and a crowd pleaser at the same time. Now, certainly large green chilies are the most commonly used for chile rellenos, but in the central and southern part of Mexico, you also find dried chilies used. In fact, sometimes I think they're my favorite versions of chile rellenos. What I have in front of me right now is a version from Oaxaca. Now, I'm in a restaurant, a Oaxacan-style restaurant in Mexico City, and the chef is a young guy that's really making waves. His name is Romulo Mendoza, and the place is called Pasilla de Humo, giving homage to that smoky live fire taco corridor in downtown Oaxaca City. And what he's done is to take one of the most famous of the dried chilies from Oaxaca, the one that's called chile pasillo oaxaqueño or chile mije, soaked it in water until it was pliable, then opened it up and filled it with those famous, delicious Oaxacan black beans that are cooked with avocado leaf. On top goes a piece of queso fresco or fresh cheese, then some pickled onions, some fresh garnishes around the whole thing, and it makes an absolutely delicious plate. Now here is where chiles rellenos take another turn. This is my favorite place in Mexico City for the classic fried fish tacos. But what they do here is to take jalapeños and stuff them with smoked shredded marlin. It's a specialty of the west coast of Mexico. And then they batter and fry them just like they were frying the fish for those classic tacos.
Buen provecho.
Muchas gracias.
Para servirle.
Now, where it even gets more interesting is with the condiments. I'm going to start with some of this creamy cabbage, and then some of this avocado mayo. I love pickled red onions, so I'm going to put some of those on the top of it. Then a little of this chopped salsa mexicana. How about a squeeze of lime over everything? I think I may have done too much. Now, when you're going to make the best chiles rellenos, the first thing you got to get is the best chiles, right? And in most places in Mexico, they would say that's going to be the poblano chili. Good thing for us in the United States is that we can find poblano chilies in practically every grocery store. But sometimes they're going to look a little bit different because in Mexico, oftentimes they're fresher. So what does freshness look like? Well, I think this is a perfect example because you can see that the skin is very taut and it looks really brilliant in color. It's not discolored, it's not wrinkly at all. So you know that if you get a chili that looks like this, it's going to be the best one that you could choose. Now, for making chile rellenos, you're going to want to choose ones that are kind of medium size. I think this is a medium sized one. Not too small because you won't get enough filling in them. Too big and they just become monstrosities, hard to work with. But you want ones that don't have deep indentions in them because the deep indentions are just going to make your life so hard when you go to skin these. Now, for those of you with a taste for really fiery food, well, you might want to choose jalapeños to stuff. But that's a different story. Okay, you've told me that making chiles rellenos at home is a daunting task. And yes, it is to a certain extent, but I have broken down the steps into what I think are very achievable ones for you. And we're going to start by making a tomato base. Part of that is going to go into our pork filling, and the other part is going to become the brothy sauce. I've started here by browning some onions. This is sort of a high heat caramelization, if you will. I'm cooking it in pork lard because we have a pork filling and I love that flavor. You can choose oil to do that. Now, when it comes to the tomato part of it, I have 2 large cans of tomatoes. You could choose the fire roasted type if you wish, because that will add you a little bit more depth of flavor. But just to get through this easily, I'm focusing on canned tomatoes for it. Blend those tomatoes until smooth. Then pour them in with the browned onions. Now, while that simmers, grind some black pepper and Mexican cinnamon. You can feel free to use pre-ground spices if you like. Add those spices to the tomatoes and onions and let it simmer for another 20 minutes or so until the sauce thickens noticeably. So I've cooked this beautiful fresh ground pork. It's getting some brown on it now, and I'm going to stir into it 2 cups of this thick tomato base. So you can see that it's the consistency of like a really thick tomato sauce, like a marinara sauce. And then I have some raisins to put in here. These are all really classic things, and I love the little sweet counterpoint that you find there. And then I like to put just a little bit of vinegar in it to bring out all the, pop up all of these flavors. So I'll pour that in and then stir everything together. This will need about 10 minutes or so of cooking for all of those flavors to come together. Finish the pork picadillo with some toasted flaked almonds. Then add chicken broth to the remaining tomato sauce and let that simmer on low heat for another 45 minutes or so. So we're all set up now to prepare the chilies, and most recipes would tell you to roast them over an open flame until they're black and blistered on the outside. Since chiles rellenos are always fried, I say the easiest way to prep the chilies is to blanch them in the hot oil. So I have heated the oil to about 360 degrees. They won't take more than 3 minutes or so, and I'll just drop them one at a time into the hot oil. And you'll notice that they didn't make much of a sound, but the skins will start to blister right away. You can hear that little popping going here. And when they're completely blistered on one side, I'll flip them over and blister them on the other side. Okay, there we go. Now, once these are cooled down, I'm gonna slip off that skin. It's blistered now, so it'll come off really easily. Then I'm gonna use a small knife to cut from the stem end all the way down to the point end and very carefully open it up. But I wanna be very careful not to rip it here at all. Then I'm gonna put my index finger inside of it and dislodge all the seeds that are in the seed pod. Then very quickly rinse the chili off just to get all those seeds out of there. And you're ready to go on to the stuffing. So I'm gonna put a portion of the stuffing into each one of the chilies and then sort of press it all together so that I reform the chili to look just like it did when we started. Okay, the next step is to run a skewer in them to keep them together, overlapping the two sides of the chile, going in and then coming right back out, just like that. Now, after I've skewered them all that way, here's a little tip I'm gonna give you. Put them into the freezer for about an hour or two. It will not only firm them up and make them easier to work with, but it'll help the batter to hold on them. So the classic batter for chiles rellenos is what I call a souffle batter, meaning that we're going to beat egg whites, then we're going to fold the egg yolks into it. I add a little salt, I add a little bit of flour to make it a little bit more stable, but it's basically an unstable souffle batter, so you need to work quickly at this point. The first thing that I'm going to do is to separate the eggs. Once the eggs are separated, whip the whites until you have stiff peaks. I also like to add a little bit of salt at this point for seasoning. Then break up the egg yolks and fold them into the egg whites very gently with your whisk. Add some flour and gently fold that in as well. Now is the moment. I'm gonna roll it in flour, and that's just to help make that batter stick also. Shake off the flour, make sure that it's an even coating all the way around. Then dip it into your batter here, and make sure you get it all the way up to the top, like that, so it evenly coats. And then lay it into the hot oil. Trying to get a little bit of the oil on all sides of it. I like to take a little bit of the oil now and very gently baste it over the top to set the top part of the batter as well. After about 3 minutes or so of cooking on one side, they'll be golden on that side. I'll flip them over and then cook them until they're golden on the other side. Okay, we are done. Now, I do it up to this point before my guests arrive. And then when it's time to serve these beautiful chiles, I put them into a 400-degree oven and I let them heat through. One thing that you'll get is peace of mind. The second thing you'll get is a little bit more crispness out of that souffle batter on the top. So if you are looking for that, this is a good way to go. Now it's time to serve. So I'm going to serve the sauce underneath rather than on top of the chile relleno. So I will ladle some in to cover the bottom of the plate, like that. And set it right down in the middle. It may look like a lot of sauce to you, but I'll tell you, when you start to eat this, you're going to be happy to have all that sauce there. I think just some beautiful flat leaf parsley leaves to sprinkle on and around the plate is a beautiful garnish for it. Simplicity, perfection. Most people think that you have to have a huge garden to grow anything, but the truth is you don't. You can grow all kinds of things in small containers, from herbs all the way to tomatoes. Check out the internet. You can find all kinds of varieties of tomatoes that grow beautifully in pots. They'll grow to about 2 feet high. But there's several things that you really need to know about it. First is you have to have a sunny spot. They're going to need about 6 hours or so of full sun every day to ripen. Secondly is you've got to have a container that's big enough for them. It's going to be a container that's bigger than you think because they have very vigorous root growth and you don't want them to become root bound. The next thing is that you need to keep the soil uniformly moist. You can't let it really dry out at all, especially until you get all of the fruit set. It's going to want to be very well drained soil, so before you put the plant in there, I suggest that you cover the bottom of your container with rocks so that all the water can easily drain out of it. And if you follow those basic rules, then by the end of the season, from a container, you can have an amazing tomato harvest. Of course, those golden battered chiles rellenos are a thing of wonder. But let's face it, sometimes we just don't have time to go through all of those steps. So I'm going to show you another version of chiles rellenos, this time with some grilled vegetables. In fact, I'm going to do the whole thing on the grill, and I think you're going to love this as a great summer option. The first thing that we have to do is to blister those poblano chilies on the grill. I've got it heated quite hot. At the same time, I'm going to be doing some roasting of tomatoes for a salsa to serve with it. I'm going to use this perforated grill pan to contain the tomatoes here, but I'm going to roast these poblanos directly over the hottest part of the grill. I'm looking to char the skins of those poblanos, but that'll take just a minute. So while those are starting to cook, I'm going to slice up these other ingredients that are either going to go into the salsa or into the filling for these chiles rellenos. Now, while these are cooling off and the tomatoes are finishing roasting, I'm going to lay out these vegetables and oil and salt both sides of each slice. Okay, now I have grilled some beautiful Mexican zucchini. You know, the light green ones that are either in a teardrop shape or round. This is berenjena or eggplant, some red onions, some serrano chilies, and of course the tomatoes that went on first with these poblanos. The poblanos have cooled down now, so I'm going to treat them just like you would the chiles for any kind of chile rellenos. Just peeling off that blistered skin and then cutting a slit in them, opening them up and fishing out all of the seeds that are in the inside. I like to give them a brief rinse at the end to make sure I get all of those seeds out. Okay, we've got those finished. Now it's on to the filling. I'm going to chop up the grilled vegetables to form a filling. Well, everything except for the tomatoes and the green chilies. Those are going to become a salsa. I encourage you to choose any herb or herbs that you like for this filling. I've got some parsley here, some fresh marjoram, some thyme, but if you like basil, then choose basil. If you like cilantro, please choose those and put them in. I'm going to pull the leaves off of these herbs and then chop them up. Half of it will go into the filling and half of it I'm going to add to our grilled tomato salsa. Now we've got a binder for this beautiful mixture of roasted vegetables, and that is some cream cheese. It's at room temperature. I've let it sit out here for a little while, and then I'm going to start mixing in all of the vegetables. And one last little flavoring here is a little Parmesan. You could use the Mexican queso añejo or cotija cheese for this, or just a little aged Parmesan. Stir that in. And now it's time to fill these roasted and peeled poblano chilies. For the salsa, put the tomatoes in a food processor, blackened skins and all, along with the charred chilies, and pulse it until it's got the texture of a coarse puree. Add some salt, a little bit of chopped onion, and the remaining half of those beautiful fresh herbs. Pulse it a couple more times just to blend it all together, and you're ready to serve. Spoon some of our grill roasted tomato salsa onto the bottom of a plate. Now I'm serving these at room temperature because I think they're the perfect summer dish to serve at room temperature, but if you wish you could pop these into the oven and warm them up. I like to serve them seam side down like that, and then grate a little bit more of the Parmesan over the top of it. And I've got some beautiful little parsley leaves here to sprinkle around. And you've got the perfect summer dish. Okay, so I fired up your appetite. Some of my favorite dishes, entertaining tips, and Mexican travel inspirations. Well, now I want to hear what you have to say. Visit us at rickbayless.com/TV for recipes and a whole lot more.